This is an immensely cosmopolitan city, one of the hippest, jazziest, and fashionable cities anywhere. Think of Rodeo Drive in Los Angeles, Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, the Chicago skyline and Michigan Avenue, all rolled into one expansive, modern metropolis.
And now, The Edwin Black Show. Sponsored by the Books of Edwin Black, available on Amazon and at booksellers worldwide. And now, here's Edwin.
Let me just say again, welcome to the Edwin Black Show, coming to you today live from Mexico City. And I'm Edwin Black, investigative journalist, historian, and author of 200 editions in 40 languages in 190 countries worldwide. If you like our show's content, spread the word. If you want to support our work, please visit theedwinblackshow.com/support. Your help, big or small, assures our complete and utter intellectual and uncensored journalistic independence. Today's episode is sponsored without any preconditions, requests, or stipulations by leading members of the Mexico City Jewish community. Today, we welcome guests from across America, including our 4 watch parties in the villages, Newton, Mass., Chicago, and Tampa Bay. Harvey, thank you for joining us. Overseas, I see viewers logged on from Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Holland, Sweden, France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Germany, Hungary, Great Britain, Canada, and of course, we have plenty logged on from Mexico, India, and Israel, plus other countries. If you have a question limited to today's topics, place one short sentence without preamble in Zoom's QA feature. The Edwin Black Show, along with our YouTube site, is global and fast growing, enjoying many tens of thousands of views. We speak frankly and without tremor to a fragmented world seeking better understanding of our tormented past, our present, very, very tense, and a future still uncertain. By the way, stay tuned for my special word of wisdom at the very end of the show, just before I sign off. We'll get to our engaging topic live from Mexico City in a few minutes after some brief announcements and then reports from the week. Announcements first. At the Edwin Black Show and our companion YouTube site, we have just released more compelling and hard-hitting episodes. The latest is Unanswered Questions 14 from last December. My appearance tour continues. Right now, I'm wrapping up a powerful community-wide 4-event series sponsored by Yad Vashem and this country's extraordinary Museum of Tolerance. Next month, I address a 3-state gathering in Wheeling, West Virginia. You can get details of all my appearances from edwinblack.com/events. And let us meet up in your city. Stand tall. I'm coming your way. Finally, I remind my viewers of a terrible website you must know about, publishing the ghoulish videos from October 7th. This is the war crime documentation Israel will need to prosecute after the war. See it at hamas-massacre.net. Items now from the week. I remind everyone that we are now in the midst of World War J, the global war against the Jews, both in the Middle East, at home, and in America, and indeed roiling throughout the nations of the world. Now to the bad news streaming into my office every minute of every day. I have selected just a few. Canada, Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto. The hospital was established because Jewish doctors had no place to train or work due to anti-Semitism. But a few days ago, a crowd of Palestinian thugs chanted for violence against Jews in the quiet zone of this hospital. To get inside, to intimidate Jewish doctors and bypass security, they actually scaled the walls to reach upstairs windows. Ontario now, Leah Goldstein, a trailblazing Canadian cyclist, was removed as keynote speaker at an International Women's Day scheduled for next month. She made history as the first woman to win a grueling 3,000-mile bike race across the United States. But she served in the IDF 30 years ago, and so she was disinvited. UK, in London, Jews were chased out of the Soho Theatre by a crazed Palestinian mob screaming, "Free Palestine." This theater is well known as a former synagogue. London again. Today, the birth certificate of a 6-month-old submitted to the Home Office was returned to parents, ripped with the word Israel scribbled out in the birth section. The Home Office is investigating. Brussels, at the Belgian Parliament, an imam recited a Quran passage calling for the killing and the kidnapping of Jews. The Quran excerpt is verse 33:26 from the Al-Azab Surah. It translates to, "And he brought down those people of the book." People of the book, by the way, means Jewish people. He brought down those from the people of the book who supported the enemy alliance from their own strongholds and cast horror into their hearts. You believers killed some and took others captive, close quote. This, my friends, was in the Belgian Parliament. New York, an identifiably Jewish man was just standing in Staten Island when he was suddenly hit in the back of the head with a baseball bat. The assailant screamed, "Dirty Jew!" The cops have his picture from the video, but the assailant is still at large. Fort Lauderdale, an identifiably Jewish man was beaten, and the charged perpetrator, alleged Trevor Rodney, yelled an anti-Jewish slur when he did it. The accused is now out on bond. World War J, we see it unfold. The Palestinian thugs are not engaged in a typical protest movement. They're using street violence that every day becomes bolder and bolder and more brazen. This is the well-known manifestation of the Arab street. The mob violence is always lurking just below the surface, but now it is not. In Dagestan, Baghdad, Cairo, or even Lud, it is in disintegrating Toronto, New York, and California. While the Jews are proofreading their next petition, letter to the editor, and governmental correspondence, the violent, skull-bashing, Farhood-like Arab street is checking the map address of our synagogues, our delis, our supermarkets, and even our private homes, readying to bubble over into bloodletting. Go ahead, Jews. Keep arguing amongst yourself. The boxcar in the killing rampage knows no hierarchy or progressive logo. It didn't on October 7th. It shall not when this atrocity one day soon comes to a locality near you. Remember, as the Roman legions, the Second Temple in about 70 CE, the Roman generals paused their attack because they discovered the disagreeing Jews in the temple were killing each other, and so they gave them time to finish their self-annihilation. Now to the war against Hamas. At the recent Munich Security Conference, President Herzog showed Washington Post columnist David Ignatius a copy of a UN booklet for beginning school children. Hey Wes, listen up, this is for you. The school book was written by Mahmoud Az-Zahar, a founder of Hamas and a former foreign minister of the Palestinian Authority. The book was entitled The End of the Jews. It has a section labeled The World's Burning Hatred of Jews and another labeled Reasons to Expel the Jews. It explicitly teaches the youngest children to glorify the Nazi Holocaust and offers a blueprint to their mass murder and destruction. In Brazil, the idiot President Lula, a man convicted of money laundering and imprisoned until his questionable court-ordered release, had the witlessness to claim that Netanyahu was like Hitler. Did Hitler offer humanitarian corridors, create temporary safe zones, deliver ventilators to hospitals in spite of their terror installations, and facilitate hundreds of food trucks. Brazil is an expert at Nazism. You opened your country to numerous senior Nazis fleeing justice at Nuremberg, and this includes the Auschwitz monster, Dr. Joseph Mengele, who died peacefully in his comfortable setting in Sao Paulo, Brazil, where he was given refuge by your government. Lula, read a book, and until then, keep your mouth shut. Two more war items. Israel is now working on a plan to move Palestinians unaffiliated with Hamas back to Gaza City, where they can set up their own self-government to self-rule their own daily lives, minus genocidal actions. Now hear this. Hours ago, attorneys in Florida affiliated with the nonprofit National Jewish Advocacy Center representing October 7th survivors have filed a federal lawsuit against the Associated Press. That's right, the Associated Press, under the anti-terrorism statute. The federal court action also names the 4 freelance photographers whose work the AP embedded, purchased, and published. All 4, it says, are, quote, known Hamas associates who were gleefully embedded by the Associated Press with the Hamas terrorists during the October 7th attacks. I'm glad they filed that suit. The AP is charged with aiding and abetting the terrorism of that bloody day, and I'll be happy to give you more as I learn it. Finally, there has been much chatter about Antony Blinken's State Department and the Biden administration trying to force a Palestinian state into existence and onto Israel. Biden and Blinken do not care about a Palestinian state. They care about the Michigan state and catering to the anti-Semitic and anti-Israel bloc of some 200 to 250,000 Arab and Islamic votes in Michigan, which the Democrats need to win in November. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the Democrats are desperately catering to Arab Nazis to win the presidency. The Biden-Blinken plan is patently illegal under international agreements, including Oslo. The Israel public is 90% against the idea because the PA promises to turn over any such new independent state to Hamas for governance. And then we see October 7 as an annual massacre. Give it up, Biden. The road to statehood is not paved over the roasted torsos of infants and the raped bodies of women and girls, at least one of which we know through testing was raped by 67 different men. Plus, the Arabs of Michigan are not idiots, and they know you, Biden and Blinken, are double talking to them. The Abandon Joe movement in Arab Michigan is getting more entrenched and mobilized every day. They don't care if Trump wins, only that Biden loses. The State Department can't do anything about it with apologies and fake news stories. Besides, the State Department is busy being stupid. That's right. They're issuing memos declaring that in the name of gender insanity, staffers of the State Department should not use terms such as mother and father, and even man and woman or men and women. Yes, under this gender dementia, Blinken's recent salute to the brave men and women of the United States military would be strictly verboten. This is the governmental unit trying to engineer a Palestinian state devoted to further massacres, but this time from stem to stern across the Jewish state. And what a frightening prospect it would be for continuous war throughout this decade and the next. And now to my pre-monologue. Many of you have asked me to describe my father, who just died as I was coming to Mexico City. Yes, I diverted to Florida for the funeral last Friday and made it here. You will notice that I'm wearing the common torn ribbon of mourning as a substitute for tearing my shirt. It's like this. My father was a teenager in Poland when he walked away from a shooting place to become a Polish partisan in the woods. My mother was in a boxcar rushing to the Treblinka death camp when her mother pushed her out of the tiny vent at the top. She fell to the ground and was discovered by anti-Semitic Polish militiamen of the AK, and they shot her, left her for dead in a mass snowy grave. My father came by the grave-like mound, and saw her leg move. He pulled her out, brought her back to life, and they lived in the woods for 2 years by courage and by moonlight, using strength, conviction, and courage as a compass. My mom is gone, and when my father died some days ago, he left an audio message for me and progeny. Never give up. That's a quote.
And survived Hitler for the future generations to carry on. Whatever happens, never give up, never.
He fought Polish anti-Semitism in the 1930s, Hitler's Holocaust in the 1940s, America's anti-Semitism in the 1950s, the struggle to defeat poverty for his family in the 60s and 70s, and he finally brought the struggle to remember into this century. He lived just shy of 100 years, just long enough to hear the motto, never again, morph into the burning admission that, quote, never again is now, close quote. I do not mourn his century. I celebrate it. I emulate it. And I have ensured that my daughter and granddaughter will replicate it, his courage and his legacy both. And now to my very brief monologue. And I'm so sorry about the technical glitches that we have experienced. Welcome everyone now to the Edwin Black Show, coming to you live from Mexico City. I want to give you a few words about this magnificent metropolis and megacity of more than 21 million people that sprawls across rivers, canyons, valleys. This is my second visit. I know many of you have images of Mexico that stretch from the helpless village of the Magnificent Seven to the bloody domination of the smuggling and drug cartels that hourly assault our border with human trafficking and fentanyl. But that is not the Mexico City that I am experiencing. I am experiencing a city that is one of the safest in the hemisphere, with a murder rate far below Baltimore, Chicago, and New Orleans, in part because Mexico City has a large, uniformed, preventive police force of approximately 34,000 officers, plus 40,000 auxiliary police and 15,000 banking police. These nearly 90,000 officers work for the Secretariat of Citizen Security of Mexico City. Add to that tens of thousands of armed private security officers, and you see law enforcement every few feet in Mexico City. And I mean every few feet. This is an immensely cosmopolitan city, one of the hippest, jazziest, and fashionable cities anywhere. Think of Rodeo Drive in Los Angeles, Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, the Chicago skyline and Michigan Avenue, all rolled into one expansive, modern metropolis. Here you will find the finest hotels in the world stacked along the famous and exquisite Reforma Boulevard, numerous in-city parks and wooded spaces. At every angle you see audacious, in-your-face architecture that defies straight lines, seems to rise in two directions at once, boasts vibrant color for the sake of an ever-bursting visual culture that prefers red and green to black and gray. The private residences are elaborate dwellings, and each one is staunched behind a high wall and a portal created artistically from various forms of polished wood, bold metal, or mixed materials. Forget about the Mexican food you know in the US. That is a cartoon of the cuisine found here. The city is filled with hundreds of hip fusion restaurants, pushing culinary boundaries, converging recipes from across the planet, all in swanky settings that dwarfs much of what we have in the U.S. Most importantly, I've never met an individual in Mexico City, rich or poor, executive or laborer, who is not gracious and a pleasure to interact with. Mexico City is connected to all other dots on the world, and from here you can conjoin politics, art, and modernity throughout the four corners of the planet. People here are devoted to causes, political, humanitarian, economic, artistic, and historic. The craziest modern architecture stands next to the most historic churches and antique structures. They preserve their legacy and integrate them into irrepressible modernity. This is not to accuse Mexico City of being a place without flaws. It has stretching poverty, inequity, and hardship like all other major cities, but change and knowledge seems welcome in many parts of this city, and that is why I came to create my own architecture of fact, history, and knowledge to join the cityscape here and uplift the people seeking to be uplifted, even as they are in the midst of repressive and regressive forces. My partner down here is Francisco Gil-White, a devoted human rights historian, analyst, Israel lover, and an observer of all trends and amends that I also care about. So let's break out the mezcal and lift them high for Mexico City, its people, its problems, its possibilities, and its perseverance. I'm going to be specifically using a bottle of mezcal that is produced by the family of one of my friends here. A little bit for you. A little bit for you. Now, we're not going to use the traditional oranges and worm salt, but I say to you, L'chaim. To Francisco, take the camera and tell me what you know about Mexico City, its Jewish community, and the looming threats we both see after the massacres of October 7th. Bring on the chips and the guacamole. L'chaim. Salud.
Salud. So anyway, I want to complete the commercial because the mezcal we're drinking is Cien Pies mezcal, just so that everybody knows.
Okay.
And it is fantastic. All right, so a few words about Mexico and the Mexican Jewish community. So Mexican Jews started coming here around the biggest migrations were in the first half of the 20th century. That's when most people came. Most of the Mexican Jews are actually from Syria. There's two main communities that came from Syria, from Aleppo and from Damascus. So the Aleppo community, they are called Halevis. The Damascus community, they are called Shamis. And the Shamis are organized in Mount Sinai, which is where you spoke. And the Halevis are in Magen David community. And then we also have a smaller Ashkenazi community and a community that is called Sephardic and also sometimes called Turkish, because the Sephardic Jews, many Sephardic Jews who were expelled from Spain in 1492 ended up in Ottoman Turkey. And from there, some of them migrated to Mexico. And those are our Sephardic Jews here. So sometimes they're called Turkish Jews. And what else can I tell you? Well, the Mexican Jewish community tends to be fairly religious compared to communities in other places. And they're also very pro-Israel compared to some other Jewish communities. So we have a strong Zionist contingent here, lots of religious practice. And since October 7th, we had not seen a whole lot of, very expressive anti-Semitism here. We had seen some, but not a whole lot. But it's certainly grown since October 7th. A lot of people are getting worried. Part of the context of that is that we have a leftist government, and the left everywhere has tended to become anti-Semitic. So part of the climate that we're now seeing has to do in part with the fact that we are ruled by a leftist party and that promotes these kinds of positions. So that's the situation we're in right now. As you said in your talk on Tuesday, I don't think we should expect this to get better anytime soon. So it's important that people be aware of what the situation is like and take it seriously.
Thank you very much, Francisco, for that important observation. So, in other words, the Syrian Jews themselves are divided up into silos, and the Damascus Jews stay to themselves, and the Aleppo Jews stay to themselves.
Well, I wouldn't say that they stay to themselves, but they certainly have independent community centers. So they have a synagogue and community center that is for the Damascus Jews, and then there's a community center and synagogue for the Aleppo Jews.
And you have a lot of those who have descended from crypto Jews who had hidden their Jewish identity and came in from Spain at various times.
Well, but you see, what happened there is that most of those families that had Jewish heritage and became crypto Jews, at least for a while, ended up converting to Catholicism. Those were mostly in the north, and those families are still Catholic to this day, the great majority of them.
Now, it's interesting. I noted that you say that the Spanish Jews ended up going to Turkey. And that's because some of them, and that's because the Ottoman Sultan was instrumental in rescuing and diverting all these expelled Jews from the Spanish Inquisition into the Ottoman Empire, including the Ottoman Middle East. So, has the protest movement against the Jews gone violent here as it has in the U.S.?
Well, we haven't seen too much actual physical violence here, but the verbal violence has certainly become more extreme, more common. And we've seen institutional behaviors that are very worrisome. So as you mentioned in your talk on Tuesday, there was a Holocaust Remembrance Day event that was being organized for a university in Toluca. And the students, a contingent of at least verbally violent students, threatened physical violence. They threatened to take over the premises if the event went forward. So it was canceled by the university authorities, and it had to be done online.
And I might note that most of my lectures the last time around in 2020, when I was here before, took place in the various great universities of Mexico City. And this year, we had to relocate them to Jewish institutions through Yad Vashem and the various synagogues and Jewish schools, correct?
This is true. Last time you were here, you spoke at UNAM and you spoke at ITAM, and there was absolutely no problem. But this time, it proved very difficult to get university venues for your talks.
And what is, let me ask you, what is your take on the Palestinian state that is now being mentioned by Biden, Blinken, and his comrades in the UK, France, and Canada?
Well, I think the people who propose a Palestinian state as if this were a good thing for the Palestinians, which is how this is always proposed, are obviously not friends of the Palestinians, because they're not friends of the Jews, but they're not friends of the Palestinians either, because a Palestinian state is going to be governed either by Hamas or by the Palestinian Authority or by both together. And either of those three alternatives would be terrible for the Palestinian people, because the only thing that totalitarian terrorists do is oppress the people they govern. So, and anybody who studies a little bit about the history of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict knows that the Palestinian population has been completely destroyed by the terrorists who run their lives, because they teach them hate from an early age in the kindergartens and in the schools. And they turn them into these monsters who only think about killing Jews as a kind of source of meaning for their lives. And there's nothing, I mean, I can hardly think of anything more terrible than destroying the minds of an entire population this way. So if a Palestinian state is being proposed, it's not being proposed by friends of the Palestinians. It's being proposed by enemies of the Jews.
And that's an astute observation, because if the Palestinian Authority that was established under Oslo I and Oslo II, which is a still binding, flimsy, but still binding international document, which stands up in international law, whatever that is. If there were any value to that, then the Palestinian Authority areas on the so-called West Bank, Judea and Samaria would be flourishing, and you wouldn't need 90,000 or so members of those communities lining up every day at 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning to somehow try to get into Israel proper to earn an Israeli wage. That was even done with Gaza. Is that correct?
Well, in Gaza, it's relatively recent that the people in Gaza were allowed to come into Israel to get jobs and so forth. That was a recent move to try to foster more a better relationship between Gaza and Israel and so forth. We can see how that went, because it was actually the laborers, the Palestinian laborers that were working in the kibbutzim in the south of Israel, that provided the intelligence for the terrorists about, you know, how to come in, where to go, where the people were, what their daily habits were, and so forth, so that they could kill them more easily.
And that's because the Israeli government said, well, the best way to improve the situation in Gaza is to improve the situation. We'll give them jobs, we'll give them medical care, we'll give them all of these things that they do not have, because so many billions of their foreign aid has been diverted into the missile system. Now, do you think it's going to get better in Mexico for Mexican Jewry, or have you seen the peak of the antagonism?
Well, I mean, of course, I hope that things will get better, but I don't expect things to get better anytime soon. I think that there is a strong trend now in that, in other words, there's a propaganda context that has been created that has made it acceptable for a lot of people, acceptable in quotes, for a lot of people to express their anti-Semitism, whereas before they may have felt that it was not proper. But now, because they can cloak it as opposition to the supposed genocide that Israel is conducting in Gaza, they can now express their anti-Semitism without fear that they're being improper. And in fact, a lot of verbal and even physical violence all across the West is being directed against Jews on the excuse that people oppose what's happening in Israel, as if the owner of a deli in New York had anything to do with what is happening in Israel, even if that were a bad thing, right? So,
well, do you think that the Jewish community in Mexico has the intellectual and informational goods to grasp what is knocking at their door?
No, I think we have to do a lot of work educating Mexican Jews, as we need to do with Jewish communities everywhere. One of the things I'm most interested in making clear to them is that now that they're going to try to force the creation of a Palestinian state again, as they always do, because this is the answer to everything, it's always a Palestinian state. They should understand that the Palestinian Authority, which is the proposed government of such a state, is not any better than Hamas. It's the exact same thing. These are terrorists who have an ecstatic ideology of Jew hatred, whose meaningful mission in life is to conduct a genocide of the Israeli Jews, and any representation to the contrary is just propaganda.
All right, so now thank you very much, and let me just say, Lavriut, beautiful mezcal, smoky. No one likes mezcal on their first drink, but they love it on their second drink. All right, let's go to the watch party in the villages. This is a question I got. Is Michelle Obama going to take, that's enough. Is Michelle Obama going to take Joe Biden's place to run for president? Well, a lot of people, including me, think that this is a viable possibility. I can't say it's going to happen for sure. I don't know if it's going to be Michelle or if it's going to be Newsom, the governor of California. I do not think that they're going to let Joe Biden run one way or another. And I hesitate to speculate on what one way or another means. Now, it isn't that the progressives and the Arab Nazis and the others don't want an empty suit like Biden running the country. And by the way, I'm in Mexico, where recently the president of the United States suggested that the president of Mexico was El-Sisi, who was actually the president of Egypt. That's a different country. But I believe that if they thought he could win, they would keep him where he is as an empty suit. But they fear that he cannot win. And if he cannot win, then all will be lost to the Republican side, which greatly supports Jewish human rights, Israel's human rights, peace in the Middle East, and some sort of antidote, procedural or executive order to the wars which are raging all around us. We have war we've got a regional war right now with Israel, with rockets flying in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Gaza, in the West Bank. We have threats constantly of war with China over Taiwan. Russia is constantly threatening. North Korea is trying to figure out how to get its nuclear warheads on to cruise missiles. They've already tested them. And so they are afraid that Joe Biden will lose. And indeed, some astronomical number like 80 to 90% of the American public, including Democrats and independents, believe that Joe Biden doesn't have it up here between his ears to govern the United States. But I believe that at the end, it might well be Michelle Obama. If it is Michelle Obama, it will be another disaster for the Jewish people. Remember this, Michelle Obama, who is so aggressive a spokesman and so impressive a spokesman for human rights and rights of women and for the kidnapped Nigerian girls, refused to speak out for the Israeli women who were raped and re-raped and mutilated and shot in ways I'm afraid I can't even describe to you. She refused to do that, and so did Barack Obama, showing that they are actually heartless people. And I agree with Alan Dershowitz, their former friend, who said they are friends no longer. They are now enemies of the Jewish people. So yes, I think it may well be Michelle Obama, and we'll have to deal with that when the matter is closer at hand. Do you have a thought about that?
Well, I think if it's Michelle Obama, we are going to be in a world of pain, although I think we would be in a world of pain anyway. But Obama, remember, the minute he was elected, he had this special video, this love letter to Iran. And his foreign policy was all pro-Iran. So obviously, if what we can expect from Michelle Obama would be more of the same, and we know that Iran is one of the main sponsors of the terrorist attacks against Israel. So I wouldn't expect anything to get better. I would expect everything to get worse.
Let's go to the watch party in Newton, Mass. In fact, before we go any further, I want to ask my guest here, Francisco, have you ever heard of a fig Newton? Do you know where the fig Newton was invented?
I would think, I'm going to guess Newton.
That's right. Newton, Massachusetts. Okay. All right. So the watch party wants to know, did Joe Biden abandon the climate agenda and specifically the EVs by changing the conversion regulations, and why? Yes, just a couple of days ago, Joe Biden quietly changed the emission standards and the deadlines for getting away from internal combustion machines and onto EVs. And as a result of that, it will not be possible, it is thought by most, to make the 2030 deadline for certain reduction of internal combustion exhaust. You say, why did he do this? Because there are a lot of Michigan auto workers, and Michigan auto workers know that when jobs go from the internal combustion machine to EVs, the motors are dispensed with, the engines are dispensed with in large measure, spare parts are generally 90% less. It's a completely different system. That means that there will be a huge loss of jobs. And that would be just another reason why Michigan would either be depressed for Joe Biden and the Democrats or turn against him and turn Michigan into purple state. I'd like to say that as one who has campaigned for years, I could use the word decades, for getting off of oil and switching to EVs. I should say that I know, and members of my staff know, and those who have read my book, Internal Combustion, know that if our country really wanted to get off of internal combustion machines and go into EVs, it can be done like this. All we'd have to do is instruct the postal authorities and the United States Pentagon and the federal government and certain major fleets such as Federal Express and UPS to make their next vehicle purchase, their replacement vehicle purchase, an electric or alternative fuel vehicle. That could be done like this, but that's not happening. If he really wanted to get off EVs, he could strengthen his work, any work with Elon Musk and Tesla. But Elon Musk is running a non-union shop, and he's not complicit with the current administration. And so they're basically talking the talk, but not walking the walk. That's the answer to your question. Watch party in Chicago. Were October 7th rape videos forced upon family members? Okay, I think you mean that were family members taken into captivity forced. I'm going to give everybody a chance to leave the room. I'm going to wait a minute. Or turn it off. Were family members in captivity forced to watch the rape on video of their own mothers, daughters, sisters, and even brothers? And the answer to that is yes. The information has been compiled. It's been given to the International Criminal Court prosecutors. Some of it has been given to the EU. Some of it has been given to members of the media, and I'll be reporting on more of this with deep regret soon. So the answer, Chicago, is yet. Now, here is a question I see. This is from Mark, and Mark is in Sacramento. A two-state solution has been in effect since Israel's Declaration of Independence in 1948. The first state, a Muslim state, was the one established in 1921.
22.
It was announced in 22. That's right. It was decided in 21, more or less, over a bottle of whiskey in Cairo, and it was announced in 1902. When Transjordan was created out of 75% of British mandatory Palestine, actually closer to 73%. The second state, a Jewish state, was established with Israel's declaration and UN acceptance. Very astute. That's it. That's the two states. There's no more unless Jordan wants to divide up their state. Good luck with that. Well, this is a comment as well as a question, but it's absolutely true. There was originally a 5-state solution with one Jewish state, and the Arabs consented in writing through Prince Faisal, representing the Second Syrian Democratic Congress, that the Jews should have Palestine and the Arabs would get Syria as an Arab national state. There were no Arab states until the League of Nations made them, and they made them to facilitate the exploration and transportation of oil across the Middle East and from there across the Mediterranean. And when the French reneged on the Arab state in Syria, Faisal was kicked out. They then said, there's no way we're going to allow the Jewish state to continue. And that led about to a second two-state solution. And those two states, as Mark says, were the Jewish state and Transjordan. It should be noted that no Arabs in Jewish Palestine or mandatory Palestine or Palestine by any other name identified as a Palestinian until May of 1964. There's no document. And I got $100 burning a hole in my pocket. If you have ever found a League of Nations resolution or report or a UN resolution such as UN 181, the partition plan, or a headline or a sign that says that there are Palestinian Arabs, please send it to me and an address where I can send you $100. The fact is, I already know, and everyone knows who has a clearer understanding of the period, that until May of 1964, the Palestinians were the Jewish Zionists. The Palestinians were the Jews who made the Palestine Post, the Jewish Agency for Palestine, the Palestine Football Club, the Palestine Symphony Orchestra, and so forth. Thank you for that question. Here's one from Wes. You cite polls that claim 80% of Americans don't want Joe Biden to run because he is mentally impaired. That's not true. The concern is about his overall age and level of vitality. Are you not concerned about Donald Trump's mental state? Your statement is patently false. You know it's false. NBC has stated that its poll showed that 81% of a group, including independents and Democrats, thought that he did not have the mental stability. It's not really about age. It is really about mental clarity. So I'm not considering your question valid. Do you have a comment about that?
I completely agree with you. I think if a person is advanced in age, but their mind is working fine, that's really the thing you're worried about. And if somebody's relatively young, but they have early Alzheimer, then they shouldn't be in office.
That's right. That's exactly it. And for some people, I mean, my father died just a couple of days ago, and he was bright and brilliant and completely mentally capable until his last breath. I think it shows something on behalf of the questioner. It reveals something on behalf of the questioner. When a question about surveys, which are appearing all over the media, saying that 80% and higher, and that's a number of unanimity I never heard in the United States, think that Joe Biden lacks the mental clarity, and then you add it, you tag on this accusatory question, are you not concerned about Donald Trump's mental state? Okay, so that reveals what's on your agenda. So I'm answering you. The polls are true. Everyone can go to the internet and prove this, and they're true as cited, 81% and even more. Mental clarity. And remember, I'm telling you this from Mexico. And according to Biden, the president of Mexico was Al-Sisi of Egypt. All right. Here is, let's go to some more questions. Susanna from Grand Rapids, Michigan. What should Mexico do about the border invasion? Hey, take it away, Francisco.
I mean, in principle, Mexico could stop the border invasion, but it's very, very difficult, especially if the U.S. government is not securing the border, right? So it would be a lot easier for us to help out with the movement of migrants if you had a real border. But basically what you have right now is an open border. And it's not just the fact that the border is open. It's the fact that the messages that people hear from Joe Biden and the US government, and they hear them all around the world, the message is very clear. They're not going to close it. They don't want to close it. So people all over American continent, and even from other places, because there's a lot of Chinese immigrants coming in, for example, through the Mexican border. That's something that most people don't know. So people everywhere are hearing.
I'd like to interrupt. People are just beginning to know that over 400 military-aged males and some females have infiltrated from China in the past 3 or 4 days.
That's right.
3 or 4 days.
That's right. Most people are not aware of that. So what people are hearing all over the world is that the U.S. government, the federal government, is not interested in securing the border, which of course means that all people who want to migrate decide to migrate on the basis of what they perceive to be the probability of getting in. So what the U.S. federal government is advertising to the world is that it's relatively easy to get in, that people are not being stopped at the border. So a lot of people are attempting the journey, and it's producing a gigantic humanitarian crisis because people have to cross the Darien Gap in Panama, which is an impenetrable piece of jungle that they have to walk on foot. And a lot of people who start the journey on the Colombian side do not emerge on the Panamanian side. They die en route, and that's a lot of children dying en route. So, I mean, purely on humanitarian grounds, the U.S. should close the border because that would stop a lot of people from attempting the journey and dying en route.
Well, if you were the president of Mexico, and I know that's not scheduled for a few years yet, but if
it's never going to happen.
If you were the president of Mexico, what would you personally do?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would mobilize diplomacy directed at the U.S. government to work together with the U.S. government to produce a real border. It's in neither country's interest to have these people moving through Mexico.
Why isn't the border on the south of Mexico strengthened right now? And why are the migrants being facilitated to cross the entire south to north traverse to get to the Rio Grande?
So the southern border is incredibly difficult to close because it's all jungle. So it would take a gigantic investment to close the Mexican border, which is effectively an open border. It's very difficult to police. So if the solution to the migration is to have the southern Mexican border closed, then we, as president of Mexico, what I would do is I would ask for a lot of help from the United States to close the southern border because it's very difficult for Mexico to do that alone. It's a very, very expensive border to close.
Are you suggesting that if you were the president of Mexico, that you would enter into a SOFA with the United States, status of forces agreement, and allow U.S. soldiers on Mexican soil to assist you?
I would never allow U.S. soldiers on Mexican
Why
soil.
is it contingent upon America closing its border, which it must do for Mexico to not take its own unilateral moves?
My argument would be it's in the U.S. interest to close the Mexican southern border, right? That would be my argument. Given that it's very hard for Mexico to do so, I would ask for support from the U.S. government in terms of investment to help us build the infrastructure that is necessary to close the southern border. That's what I would do.
And what kind of infrastructure would that be?
Well, you would need a lot of patrolling first of all, and you would need some physical structures to prevent people from crossing.
You talking about things like walls?
Sure.
And those
fences, etc.
Flotation devices?
I don't know what a flotation device is.
Those round things that are in the Rio Grande that people...
Right, stuff like that.
All right, so you would be in favor of that?
Well, I'm generally in favor of countries being countries, right? So you're not a real country unless you can secure your borders. All
right, this is from Gerald in Miami. And Gerald wants to know if the United States is creating superhuman soldiers. Now, this is left over from one of our prior questions, and I did decide to utilize it now. And the answer is yes, they are. When I say superhuman, I mean that these are soldiers who have been given various drugs and injections to make them lose their sense of fear, increase their sense of bravado, stay up later at night. Now, you should know this is not the first time this was done. Hitler did this with his own soldiers during the Blitzkrieg, and Hamas gave a similar potion to its killers when they came across, which is why so many of them appear to be crazed. Thank you for that question. And we're out of time. And I want to apologize for the initial video. We tried very hard to do something very spectacular on very few resources. And I'm glad the video finally came in. We think we can find a whole video for the edited version, which will be out in about a month. So I want you to hold for my closing word of wisdom, just 1 minute away. But first, I thank my esteemed audience, and I also thank my talented international team, including Virginia in New Jersey, Holly in Nashville, Wes in San Francisco, John in Japan, as well as many others in numerous additional cities around the world. My team, each of them, is comprised of very dedicated people. I and we all owe them. I'll see everyone back here in 2 weeks at 3 p.m. Eastern. If you want to be a friend of the Edwin Black Show, go to theedwinblackshow.com/support. Keep me independent. You want to hear me in person? Watch my website for events. I'm in Mexico now, and I'll be in Wheeling, West Virginia in March. Consult my events page at edwinblack.com. Until then, head over to any Barnes & Noble in the USA or any Amazon, Walmart, Apple, Google Books, or Kobo platform in 190 countries across this roiling, toiling, boiling planet, where you can find any of my 200 book editions, such as IBM and the Holocaust. If you want an autographed copy, hit my personal newly redesigned website, edwinblack.com, and click books. Get access to participate live in future shows at theedwinblackshow.com. You'll see a much enhanced and exquisitely produced version of this show and prior episodes by subscribing to our YouTube channel at The Edwin Black Show and click that notification button like tens of thousands of others have. You will love them. We put new ones up each week, produced by a bold international crew. Follow me at Edwin Black Book on X as well as Facebook. And now, for my closing word of wisdom, your second duty is to love all of mankind. Your first duty is to survive all of mankind. Adios, amigos. I'm zooming out from Mexico City. L'chaim.
L'chaim.
Bless you all.